Welcome to the Lara Jane Layton Show. This podcast is for you, the person who keeps putting others first. Your self-talk has held you back. You no longer need to take a second seat. Let's explore ways to overcome self-doubt. You can silence that inner bully voice and achieve your full potential. Here's your host, Lara Jane.
Hey friend, it's your host, Lara Jane, and I am so excited to introduce Janis to you. She's my new friend, and I love her subject. And it's like personal growth and self-care is our high level, but she's a movement specialist. And I want to hear more about how movement can help us in this self-care and personal growth process. All the notes about Janis are in the show notes right now for you to go down and listen to or look at. You can't listen to them. And her contact information is there. So Janis, help my friend that's here with us today learn about movement and personal growth.
Absolutely. So I often find that when people come in to see me, that they're busy people. And I'm sure that you all can relate to that. You're busy. And going to the gym is something maybe you have done, pretty much everybody has gone to the gym at some point. You don't like it, or you can't find time to do it, or it's expensive, or it's inconvenient. And so you give up and you just say, I don't have time to do that, or I'm not getting the results that I want. And within that kind of self-care umbrella, there's actually nothing more important than moving your body. And of course I have a bias because I'm a movement specialist. But what I really do is I work with people who have pain in their body. So what I notice is that one of the common threads is that we are type A individuals. I do what I do for a living because I am that person. So I actually had a completely different career, and pain in my body that I couldn't find a solution for became a really loud noise in the room. So I couldn't focus on creating content. I couldn't write documents. I couldn't go to things that I wanted to because I had pain. And so that's a really specific kind of outcome. But this is happening to a lot of people all the time. And it doesn't often kind of start from nowhere. It often is a bit of a gradient where we don't go from 0 to 100. But that exercise piece of it is actually critically important. And it's also the fastest way to kind of bring out that inner teenager in us where we're like, oh, I don't have time. Like, I can't do this. And we find these kind of resistant pieces, or because we are type A, we go straight into, okay, now I'm going to carve out 2 hours a day and we're going to run a half marathon and we're going to do all the things. So within that umbrella of self-care, I actually put movement as my pyramid, but it doesn't necessarily look like traditional exercise programs. We don't need a gym. What we're trying to do there is sustain the body so that it can be a non-factor and a non-issue. And because as soon as we're in pain, we have a big hole to climb out of, then that's time consuming and expensive.
Yeah. And when my pain's always been from injuries and or like migraines. So I haven't had other types of pain that I've had to deal with. But at the same time, when I have a migraine, you kind of get in that dark room, you shut the door and you completely shut everything out. And there is no movement. And so I don't know, is there a way that movement would actually help that? And we don't have to focus on migraines, but I understand this kind of pain. And
yes.
So
yes. And I laugh because I understand it as well. I have a child with migraines, chronic migraines. So I happen to understand that one as well. Migraines as a really specific condition. When you actually have a migraine attack, exercise is not going to help it. But research shows, as it does actually, to be quite frank with you, pretty much across the board, basically every condition that we could name or think of is going to fundamentally be helped by exercise. So I want to delineate between exercise and movement. So most of the time, most of us really have a very specific definition of what exercise is. It's hitting specific targets on your Apple Watch, or it's hitting specific calorie burn numbers, or it's getting your heart rate up. And usually it's for a specific amount of time. So we're, going to a 60-minute cardio burn class, etc. And that's the piece that I find that people really push back against. So I really shift that into movement. Movement is something that we do from the second we're born until basically we die. So movement is taking a breath. Movement is your inhale and exhale. Movement is my mouth moving. Movement is me. I'm currently moving my arms for people who are listening. So that's movement. And so what we want to be able to do as humans is transfer load through the body. So I'm sitting here and you're sitting here, and we have gravity pushing down on our spine. How is that gravity passing through your body? And then when you start moving your limbs, twisting your trunk, opening your mouth, where is that gravity and how are those muscles and bones moving around? So that's a really different definition than most of us have in mind. So when we get things like migraine or back pain or knee pain or sciatica, something in the system isn't functioning with homeostasis, basically. So not everything on this planet is solved by exercise, but our bodies are just simply not meant to be sedentary. So when we start to shift that definition of, I need movement in my life that looks healthy, that can be very different than an exercise program. So I walk, and often if you actually look at if you were to go inside my brain, that's not going to count as exercise. So in my brain, exercise is, it has to hit a target heart rate. It has to have a specific calorie burn. It has to, last a certain amount of time. But walking is really one of the most fundamental human things that exists. Like we learn how to do it when we're somewhere between 8 months and 15 to 24 months old. And our bodies need it to digest food and to maintain our musculature, etc. So that actually in the last year and a half, because I had a really high stress period of my life, that became my movement. At other times, it's something that does look a little bit closer to exercise. So really getting that specificity. So movement as a base of your health and self-care, Laura, for your migraines, that's going to be beneficial. But is exercise going to be beneficial when you're having an attack? Probably not. So I think that that's a subtle definition, but when we start to create that shift and get that nuance, we really can start to develop that self-care program for ourselves.
I know for me, the more I move, the less it hurts to move.
Yes.
So once you start getting up and you start moving, like I've got some pretty bad knees, and they work just fine. They get me to from point A to point B, but they don't like to get from sitting to standing. It's that 3 second of I look like a 90-year-old walking. Just trying to loosen them up and get them back to function. And then you walk normal. And so the more I find that I move in the day, the less likely they lock up, the less likely my body starts solidifying. What would be the word? Like just turning into this big rock instead of being fluid. And so I can see where movement could, if I did it regularly, prevent some of those inability to move. It's not unable, but it hurts like hell.
Absolutely. So in the last couple of years, I kind of did a little bit of back of napkin math, and we currently consider somebody who is exercising, going to the gym for an hour a day, a fit person. And I started thinking, we have 24 hours in a day. We're sleeping for 8 of those. That gives us 16 left. And if we're exercising 1 hour a day, that leaves 15 hours. What are we doing?
We're sitting on the couch potato, watching TV. That's absolutely no good.
Absolutely. And so there is nothing in human biology, nothing in human evolution Heck, there's nothing even in like human action that demonstrates that we have any history in all of humanity of ever doing this. My grandma is about to turn 101. So I have a living model for how much things have changed in the last 50 to 60 years even. So when my grandma was a child, she rode a horse to school. My child got, walked down one staircase, got in the car, and got door-to-door delivery to the school. When my grandma wanted to socialize, she would walk. I live in Canada, so she would walk a kilometer, which is about a half a mile, to the neighbor's house. When I want to socialize, I lean slightly to the left and pull my cell phone out of my pocket. So we've really taken this idea of movement, translated into, well, it has to be exercise and you have to hit these certain targets. But those day-to-day movements, that 15 hours of being sedentary, you will never, ever, ever do enough exercise to make up for that. Because what you're just referring to is your joints and bones and muscles actually need hydration. So everything, and hydration refers to, I'm certainly not, a circulatory system expert or a lymphatic expert, but we are talking literally those fluid systems that move through the body. But my piece of expertise is really in what's happening in the muscles. And we actually have tissues that actually literally dry out when we don't move them. So we have connective tissue in the body that dries out. And so what you're feeling is literally biological. It is not kind of a perception. It's not existing in your brain. It's not fake. Your tissues have dried out because you've been sitting for an hour. Because if you actually backtrack, let's say we go back 1,000 years, you're going to be spending 85 of your caloric intake getting new calories. You're not sitting there. You're not waiting. You're not waiting for your HelloFresh delivery. You're getting out and engaging. And so a lot of that actually was just by way of standing or walking or things that were not necessarily these high impact activities, but we were not sitting.
Well, even if I look at our childhood differences, I never was in the house. I was out riding my bike, screwing around on the lawn, playing hide and seek in the neighborhood with everybody.
Yeah.
And we were outdoors all the time. And my kids were more like, can I just play a video game?
Yeah.
And just the change in normality. It wasn't normal to sit in your house and watch TV 50 years ago.
No,
it is now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think biologically, we are so wired to want to do the easiest thing. So I'd say a lot of the things that I'm working on with clients is actually transferring the body's habits to do the easiest thing, which becomes the hardest thing because it creates pain. So something in your legs, if you have, we'll just use your knees as an example, something somewhere at some point is like, hey, we have an easier way to do this. And it wasn't necessarily a better way. It was just an easier way for that time, in that moment, for that activity or whatever. And then things start to kind of shift sideways as we age and do that over and over and over again. And so what I actually find really fascinating is some of our most type A people will actually exhibit the laziest bodies. Because in our culture, we are not rewarded unless you are literally a highly paid athlete. We're not actually rewarded for going for a walk. There is no reward for that. Whereas there are rewards for productivity. And in this moment of society, that's often at a desk.
That's a paper pusher.
Absolutely.
It's like,
so
and now
rewarded.
The paper's all electronic.
Totally.
You don't even get to move your fingers anymore. It's just it's totally changed.
Yes, absolutely. And so then we end up in this state of potentially chronic pain, but absolute, objectively high stress load on the body because our brains are saying, hey, we can get this award, or we can get more money, or we can get recognition at work, or we can get access to certain perks, or whatever it is that drives you to be type A. You're outrunning one problem / getting the reward there, but the body often suffers. And so I love, I would say probably because my personality is wired this way, probably 95% of my clients are that type A person. And it's kind of like, okay, how do we get the body on stream here so that the whole operation isn't just kind of where your brain and your bank account are getting rewarded? How do we find that reward within the body?
I love it. I love the whole concept of move more and feel better and hurt less.
Yes. Yes.
Like just move more. I'm not going to have this. What do? Your back starts to hurt and you kind of like, you stretch it out.
Yes,
like you don't just
absolutely.
leave it sitting there. You work through it.
That's right.
And so it makes complete sense. But for our friend that's here with us,
yes,
they're going to be at a desk and they're going to be getting rewarded for sitting there in a Zoom meeting or
100%.
typing on a computer and the movement's not there. So let's take a quick break. Get a word from our sponsor. When we come back, let's talk about how our friend that's with us can move while they're making money sitting at a desk.
For sure.
All right, we'll be right back.
This podcast is sponsored by Lara Jane Coaching. You know you're ready to silence your inner bully voice. Let Lara Jane support you with coaching. To schedule an introduction call, go to larajanelayton.com.
All right, Janis, this has got to, my mom does one of these things. She's amazing, but she has one of those little bike pedal things that she puts in front of the TV and she just goes. And it's like, I don't think I could put a bike under my desk because my knees would hit the top of the desk. Yes. So how can I, in the office, add some movement so that I don't stiffen up and so I don't lose that what did you call it? Moisture?
Yes, it's literal hydration.
Hydration. Like, so how do we stay hydrated? Because it sounds to me that like I'm sitting in front of the TV, I'm drinking at least 20 ounces of water. Yes. So it's not just a hydration thing. So once I start to move, that works that hydration back into those muscles. And
that's right.
Them out.
Yes. And I do want to clarify.
What can our friend do for that?
That's a great point. So I'll tackle the hydration first. It's not actually your water intake. So we have a substance in our tissues called hyaluronic acid. A lot of listeners might be familiar with that because it often appears now in beauty products. It is attracting and retaining 1,000% of its body weight in water. And so if you actually look at a child's skin, they kind of have that beautiful glow. Mm-hmm. It's because there's a lot of hyaluronic acid in a young person's body. It makes us shiny and attractive. We have, by age 40, approximately half of what we had at age 20. So the actual tissues are not attracting and retaining that hydration. So you can drink all the water you want, but unless you actually are stressing your tissues to create that substance, that water is just going to flush through your body. So, that's a really oversimplified definition, but just adding more water without moving isn't going to actually give you magical results unless you're actually dehydrated. So then the second part is, okay, so how do we get that movement? Okay, I'm going to give some very annoying suggestions. And I want to cloak these by saying I used to have a desk job. So this is actually my second career. I did it because I became the practitioner that I wanted to find. But I actually worked for, a decade in a different career, and it was at a desk. So I'm saying that because a lot of health practitioners have never actually worked at a desk, and I actually have. So number one, if you are lucky enough to work at home and you are doing Zoom meetings, find a spot in your home that you can actually create a place where you can sit on the floor. So I'm sitting on the floor right now. One thing that sitting on the floor does is you will move a lot more. So if you sit in the floor in any given position it's going to vary. But I have a lot of people actually that come into my studio that can't even sit on the floor. It's not even comfortable, but your hips will move. So my legs are moving around, and it's just those little shifts. It's a slight shift from my leg being at this angle to that angle, which is 5 degrees, 10 degrees, maybe. It's imperceptible. So I would doubt that anybody watching the YouTube knows that I'm moving my legs or that I'm sitting on the floor. So,
but I have a really important question.
Yes.
How do you keep your butt from going to sleep? Because when I sit on the floor, my butt goes to sleep.
I actually have a little ball behind me.
Okay.
It's a fairly big ball. So I use it almost like
a yoga seat.
I just put it at the very base of my spine, and then it just gives me a little bit of a prop up.
Okay.
Some people will use a cushion. But actually, in all honesty, the way that you keep your butt from going to sleep, you're going to start to move around. Yeah.
That's exactly that makes so much sense, because when it goes, you start shifting. Like, okay.
Yeah. And so there is a bit of an art to kind of keeping your upper body still while you're moving your legs around. But what you will notice is the legs will go in a lot more of a natural range of motion. So the natural range of motion is not to stick them straight in front of you with your knees bent and just hang out there until lunch break. That isn't it. So you'll start to notice sometimes, and your legs will do 2 different things. They're not always necessarily fully symmetrical. So okay, that's great. But if you work in an office, you're not going to suddenly be like, okay, here's my little area on the floor.
Would you just use a Bocce ball?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Okay. So that would kind of give you that movement.
Yeah. The other one I like are the knee chairs. They kind of look like a Z or a Z, depending on what country you're in. And you sit with your knees underneath you. And though a chair is never going to be the same as kind of moving around, but we want to kind of get a chair that you're going to have to do a little bit of work. So I love a comfortable chair also, but actually the more comfortable your chair is, the less muscular work that your body is going to do.
That is so true, because it's like, laying back and just relax while I do this instead of holding yourself up. Like if you can sit back 12 inches and still reach the keyboard, you're slouchy.
Totally.
You're not like, it's kind of like, I'm imagining it as when you kink a hose, you get out there and you slouch and you kink that hose, and that water and that stuff's not going through your body naturally anymore. But the second you sit up straight, you unkink that hose and your body is talking to its other parts again.
For sure. So the second thing, and again, I know this is easier said than done, but I've done it in my own life, both when I had a professional job and I do it now. So I look for inefficiencies. I look for places where I can double down. And that inefficiency is I need to talk to my coworker. Instead of using Teams or Slack, or picking up the phone.
You go to the door?
I go to the door.
You darken the doorway?
I do. When I am running an errand, I look for places that are closer to my house that I can walk to. And again, I live approximately 1 kilometer or half a mile from a retail strip. So yes, that adds 15 minutes to my errand, but it gets me off my butt going there. So I look for ways to actually be inefficient where I can add that walk and do the errand, as opposed to get in the car, run the errand, come back. I've accumulated at that point 14 steps in and out of my car, versus walking, I'm going to get 2,500 steps. So that's a really big difference in the body. You can actually do something called reward bundling, which is actually kind of similar, but basically I love listening to podcasts. So I'm only going to do that while I'm also moving, and whatever that looks like for you. So you go for that walk at lunch to get that little break, or you only watch television when you're like, okay, I'm going to do that on a treadmill. A lot of people have treadmills in their basement that they never use. So you can look for those ways.
That's the thing you put your clothes on, right?
Exactly. So you can look for those two things. So they're similar but different. One is inefficiencies that you can actually do two things at once. And for that type A brain, we feel like we are winning because we are multitasking. But you have to first wrap your head around the fact that you're going to quote unquote waste time and not do it in quote unquote the most efficient way. It eventually does become second nature, and it is more efficient because you're like, whoa, banged out some steps while doing that. But at first it does feel wasteful because you're like, I could have done that in half the time if I drove or whatever it is.
Well, that's only because you're focused on the task and not
correct.
the full everything that you're getting at the time. Because if I need something fast, I'm going to drive fast. I'm going to get
absolutely
it. I'm going to get back home. But then you've depleted yourself of that opportunity to move more.
Correct. So at least once a day, I try to look for something I can do less efficiently. And, you know, actually, like I wash my dishes by hand. That is not more efficient. I don't actually mind washing dishes, but I'm standing in the kitchen, again, getting kind of some of that movement. Then you can also, just to reiterate, you can reward bundle. So you can take something that you love and say, I'm only going to do that when I am doing this other thing. So whether that's taking a walk, going for a run, riding your bike, and of course, not everything pairs together. You're not watching television while you're riding.
If you
a bike
love
outside.
to read, don't do it while you're riding the bike.
Exactly.
Unless it's stationary.
Precisely. You got it. But just kind of start to think about creative ways that you could pair those two things. One being a leisure activity, perhaps, and the second being something that's a little bit more movement oriented. And then I've already kind of led into the third one. Movement isn't necessarily exercise. So if I'm standing washing my dishes, that's movement. I am not on the couch. I'm moving my arms. My torso has to work. There's load being transferred between my arms. I'm not counting that as like a big exercise program, but real, like, you know, we have to move. We have to stand. We cannot sit for 15 hours a day. So again, I've kind of built in some inefficiencies there, but I stand, I wash my dishes, I feel great, I got it done. And then I kind of get into that positive movement cycle because we have a world where absolutely everything can be done for us. You know, I'm not hand washing my laundry, but if you don't have to go that far back in history, and they did. So everything was required physical effort. So you can look for a couple of those things, and ideally it's not stuff you hate. I gave the example of washing dishes. That's something that takes a couple of minutes. We're not talking about hours on end. We're not talking about something that I'm like, I absolutely despise this, but it's a way to just get off my butt and do something, because in our house, it actually doesn't save me time to load the dishwasher, run it, and unload it. It's about the same. That's not going to be the case for everybody, but that's an opportunity for me to get a little bit of movement in there. We've also all heard the park your car a little bit further so that you can get a few more steps. Things like that, where it's just like, how can I stand more? And there's probably, I would bet you that if you started actually thinking about that right now, you could think of probably 15 ways between I'm going to stand on the subway as opposed to sitting down. I'm going to stand and wash my dishes as opposed to loading it up and sitting on the couch. I'm going to, you know, park a block further so that I can walk. That isn't something that we would log in our brain as exercise, but it certainly is your body's going to read it as,
keep your muscles hydrated.
Yeah. Keep your muscles hydrated. Yeah. That's really the goal here.
Yeah, because if we just do these little movements, and I know the last place I worked, when they did the remodel, everybody got a desk that adjusted to standing. And you walk out, I mean, you're in this sea of cubicles and you look out and probably 50% of the people were standing all the time. And that's what they prefer. My podcast coach, which I have not followed his instruction yet, says that you get a better sound if you're standing. And
yeah, that's true.
So he will always stand in his podcasts. So it's like, that's a long time just to stand. I would be more fidgety, and I know this is just audio, so who cares? I could fidget all I want, but subconsciously I would be like, I'm being crazy. So yeah, I can see where it would be helpful. But if I'm sitting at my desk and I'm back-to-back meetings can just standing up help? Like if I just
Yes.
stood up
Yes.
and turned around in circles and wiggled a little bit and sat
Yes.
back down, that's
Yes.
better than staying. Let's pretend like we're air dry clay. And if we sit there, we start like turning hard, but we want to stay soft. So we want to keep playing with it.
Yes. There's actually research that shows that the actual act of sitting to standing is so beneficial for your body. You do not even have to do anything more. Just sit and stand. If that's all you do because you're in back-to-back meetings, turn off that Zoom meeting, sit, stand, turn on the next one. We cannot overcome the benefits of sitting. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. We cannot overcome the negative impacts of sitting all day by doing an hour of exercise. We have to incorporate those small movements into our day. So the act of sitting to standing, if you think, I love what you just said about the hardening clay, I like to use that hydraulic idea. So if you've got your hydraulic and it's stuck together and there's no grease in there, oh, that is a lot of effort to pull it out. And that's what a lot of people's bodies start to feel like. They really feel like at those major joints, your hips, your knees, we have that hydraulic feature that with no grease, no oil, no lubrication. So just sitting and standing, the force, we think nothing of it because it's not something that most of us think is difficult, but the force of gravity, the muscular movement, and the hydration of those tissues, it is a very significant thing in our body.
So in a meeting, if it's going over an hour, take a break, say, all right, everybody, let's stand up, wiggle. Okay, let's keep going. And then everybody gets the benefit. And I know that 30 years ago, if I had said that, people would have rolled their eyes and thought I was really crazy.
Yeah.
But I know it happens today. I've been in meetings that have done it. I've never been the initiator. We've taken breaks and said, be back in 5 minutes so people can move. But it's so much more common and you're not odd if you're doing
Absolutely. That. I completely agree. And to be quite honest, even if that is not ever going to happen at your workplace, no one is going to stop you from getting up and refilling your water from the cooler in the corner. No one's going to stop you from going to the washroom or the bathroom. So there are ways that you can just do it in your own personal way without pulling full attention to it. If you work in an environment where you can pull full attention to it, even better. And everybody can just, stand up and have that moment. But I understand because our brains get fully engaged in whatever we're doing. But there are ways that you can actually just sit and stand for once an hour.
I know that if I turned on a timer and I was still sitting at my corporate desk, I could make myself, I can stand up. It's not going to take that much away from what I'm doing, that brief moment. And it sounds like, say we did it every hour and you work a 10-hour shift, or let's pretend like you only work an 8-hour shift. That's 7 times you've stood up.
Yeah.
And that's not counting the times you went to the bathroom. Is that enough to keep us hydrated in our muscles, or do we need to do even more? Because I'm like, an hour at the gym is not going to fix it.
No. So it depends on which research metric you're looking at. So there's some very recently published research that says our cardiovascular metrics improve dramatically. And we're talking years of life when we take 8,000 steps twice a week. So I know that we've had kind of that 10,000 step number kicking around for years. There's a whole back piece.
Those are the overachievers.
Totally. Exactly. But the genesis of how that particular number came to be was actually more based on the technology. It was also based on men in Japan. It was also in the 1950s. And so translating that into modern society, finally somebody has kind of researched what is the number? Where is the actual differential in terms of lifespan or cardiovascular health. So that is one metric, but 8,000 steps twice a week, most of us can actually do that. That will make a difference. If we're talking about, another metric, I'm not in pain, that might be a completely different program. So I tend to program a little bit more that way. I'm working with people who often the triggering point to come see me is knee pain, back pain, sciatica, neck pain, things like that. And to clarify, pain would actually be something more along the lines of what you were talking about. It's like that stiffness, the achiness, where you're just like, oh, my back kind of always feels this, like it needs to crack and I can't really figure this out. And it's annoying now. Or I notice that my posture is really starting to shift. So in that case, I actually often start people with kind of 15 to 20 minute programs at home where we're laying in a stretch, or we're doing Yin Yoga, or doing a technique called Yamuna Body Rolling, where we're actually doing more of a therapeutic piece of work on the body. And I will happily share that I do that myself every morning. So I am just like everyone else. I'm an aging body. And I live in a country where we have objectively cold winters. So I notice as soon as fall hits that my spine just feels that it feels dry. It feels compressed and hydrated. And since starting to add this into my daily repertoire, I don't feel that as acutely anymore. It's shifted. So Yin Yoga is a style of yoga where you hold positions for 3 to 5 minutes specifically to work on that hydration of the tissues. It will help posture. It also helps balance out that busy type A brain because you're basically laying in a void with sensation. And so that's 2 of the techniques that I use. There are certainly others, but as soon as we're kind of like, so when you said, is that enough? It depends on what your metric is, because some people it's longevity. Humans do have a really hard time thinking, I'm going to live longer in 40 years. So I'm going to do this activity today. Pain tends to be a little bit more of a hi, we're here. Mm-hmm. And we take action on that. But everybody's kind of metric of what is enough or what matters or what's going to be that motivating piece actually varies a little bit, to be honest. And so it depends on what data we're looking at. Are we looking at, your doctor just told you that you're pre-diabetic? Are we looking at weight loss? Are we looking at aesthetics? Are we looking at skin health? Are we looking at cardiovascular health? Are we looking at pain? The answer to all of them, there's no practitioner in any single one of those corners of the world where they're going to be like, no, exercise isn't part of this. So in some level it's splitting hairs, but I wouldn't suggest that somebody who has back pain, that seven kind of repetitions of standing and sitting is probably going to be adequate to move forward on that. If we're talking about somebody who's like, okay, I just don't have time, I don't know where to start. Absolutely. Yes. That's where.
If you can do nothing else, stand up once an hour. Do a little jig. Yeah. That'll be an extra bonus.
Absolutely. Yes. I'm all about do the smallest replicable, practical thing. And so what that really means is, I said this at the beginning, but we kind of have two boxes when we're type A. We either do all the things and we're hitting the gym 2 hours a night, or we're doing absolutely nothing. So that tends to be where we go. So we want to really break that down into, okay, I do nothing today. So I'm going to start by doing, and this does not come naturally to the type A brain. I'm going to sit and stand 7 times. That's what I'm going to do once an hour.
I would have to put a reminder on somewhere because I wouldn't do it. I'd get too focused.
Yeah, exactly. And so then it really is like, do I want to do this? Do I care enough? Do I have a system to remind me or build that in? Can I do this? And if it's not that, it could be something else. But we have to really put that into something that's really tiny. Replicable means that we can actually do it over and over and over and over and over again. That's why a lot of people who start gym programs fail within 6 weeks, because it isn't replicable. We can't even do that for a year, let alone 40. So we're looking for something that is just like, I can do that and continue it. And to be completely clear, that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, and it doesn't mean it's going to fold into your life instantly. So we may have to actually work at it. We may have to actually be like, here's a strategy or a reminder, or, set those things up on your computer to be like, move the desk or walk down the hall. And then you kind of want to check in, like, is this adding value? Do I want to do more, etc.? But we have to kind of start somewhere that we can say, this is small enough that it's not going to be a major thing in my life that I'm going to be like, forget it and quit and fail. It has to be something that you can repeat over and over again, basically until you die. And it has to be something that's practical and enjoyable. So if you end up feeling like, I hate this, you're probably not going to stick to it. So we need things that actually don't take a lot of willpower to do, because the body is meant to move, period. And so we're living in a society at the moment where we can choose a literal million ways of how to get that done. And so if you consider that's the part that's not optional, I have to do this, then how can we make this the most palatable solution for you and your life?
So let me see if I can summarize some of the things I've learned, because it's been a lot. So movement for my body is to keep my muscles hydrated.
Absolutely.
Hydration, not in the sense of water, but in a sense of those chemicals that are in our body that keep us loosey-goosey and not stiff.
Yes.
So we like to be loose. So we're going to move to stay hydrated. We are going to move a minimum of something every hour. So whether I'm standing up, doing a quick jig, sitting back down and getting back into the thing, that's great. If I can find a way of sitting on the floor, that's going to help me to move more. If it's in the office and you cannot sit on the floor, I work for a place that you couldn't even bring your own chair or anything in because, it would ruin the aesthetics of the office. So I actually had a doctor write me a note to allow me to take my Bosey ball to the office and sit on it. Now, from what I understand, and you might know more about this than I did, that you do not want to use it for 8 hours.
No.
That you will overdo your body.
Yes.
It's in segments of the day, maybe 30 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day. So if you are bringing in a Bosey ball, make sure you don't use it 8 hours a day.
Yep.
If they have these amazing standing desks that you don't even have to have the company supply them anymore, they just sit on top of your desk and they stand up. So, I mean, it hydraulically lifts your computer, your keyboard, and everything you need. So if you want to work standing up, you can. But standing up, doing something is better than nothing. In the middle of a meeting, if it's a long, extended meeting, let everybody relax, stand up, and move on, right?
Yep.
And still we want to exercise, still we want to drink, still we want to be healthy. Those are outside the scope of what we're talking about. It's not saying you don't have to do those anymore.
Correct.
We're going to add this to our lives, and it's going to be something simple. So I lose track of time. So it's very common for me to just let things all of a sudden it's 4:00 in the afternoon and go, where did the day go? I haven't stood up. I haven't done this. So for me, I'm going to set a reminder on my watch, because that's what they're for, right? To jiggle when you're supposed to stand up. One of the things I've done since I've been working in my home only for the last probably 9 months. I haven't been to an office for a while. As I pass 2 bathrooms before I get to the one I use every day.
Oh,
because
smart.
It's just like, the one is right outside my office door. And it's like, unless I've only used it once because I had to go that fast. So now my next thought is maybe I need to go to the downstairs one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that would get my knees moving more. Oh, now that just sounds too hard. I don't know if we could do that one.
Baby
But
steps.
just
Baby
finding
steps.
little things
Yeah.
that you can do just to add those 2 or 3 more steps to your movement. Say there's a water fountain close to where you sit in the office, and there's one on the far end of the office. Go to the far one, a couple times a day so that you're getting a little tiny bit more movement. But my question with all of the things that we've said is, I know the movement is what hydrates our muscles, but is there something else that we need to take or do to make sure we have that? Or does our body just create it and all we have to do is consume our normal liquid?
I will speak about what I take. I take 2 different things. I do take hyaluronic acid. It is sold in either encapsulated form, which just means it's in capsules, or it is sold in powder. I will mention that the powder is, it does taste a little bit like, how vitamin C has that sort of acerbic edge. Yeah. It kind of has a bit of that. So I do take that. And I also take electrolytes. So the electrolytes do help me retain the water that I'm drinking so that it's not just flushing through my system. So that's what I am taking. You would want to do a consultation with your healthcare provider, especially if you are on other supplements or other medications. So for example, and I will be very specific about this, I have low blood pressure. So for me, adding an electrolyte with a salt component is actually really beneficial for my body. For someone with high blood pressure who actually has been told to reduce sodium or salt in their diet, that perhaps is not a good option. So there are supplements out there where you are definitely going to want to check in with your doctor, your pharmacist, and your specific health clinician. But those are 2 things. Typically, our electrolyte levels are often really challenged in North American society. And so our magnesium levels will be low. Our salt intake level often is kind of off. And so I am taking that. And then I do take hyaluronic acid because that volume does drop naturally in the body. And then we just, we're like the Tin Man. Collagen can also be really, really supportive for the body because, again, that's another substance that's all about that elasticity in the body that does naturally drop. And that is another product that can be taken in multiple formats. It's some people find it has a really strong taste. I find it tasteless, but obviously my taste buds aren't picking up whatever.
Everybody's different. It's okay.
Yeah, totally. So those are, that's a list of kind of 3 supplements that we could take. But again, within the umbrella of please check with your particular health professionals before just adding those to your Amazon cart this afternoon.
I did it already. No, I didn't. But so, really the movement is the top priority, is just get some movement in.
Yes.
If you want to add the supplements, then we add these to help make sure that we're getting the right moisture and hydration into those muscles.
Yeah.
And our sediment lifestyle is kind of the culprit of a lot of our pain.
It is. Yeah, it is. We have so many developments technologically in this world that just make our life so incredible. I mean, the fact that even that you and I are able to speak on over the internet, thousands of miles away from each other, it's miraculous. But with all of that, we are not able to, at least at this point, the day of this recording, we cannot outsmart our body. There is no hack. There's no trick. There's no solution for get off your fucking ass. Period. That is it. There's just no solution. There's no way around it. We don't have any trick. We don't have any supplement. There's no special food. You have to get off your fucking ass and move. That's it. And so put that up on your wall. And the
get
ways
off your
that
fucking ass. That's going to be right on my computer.
And the ways that you choose to execute that will differ because it does come down to how are you going to do that? I do want to just really quickly talk about habits.
Okay.
We have had it ground into our head that it takes 21 days to make a habit. Untrue. Bullshit. That you've been lied to. So there finally was a bit of research that came out recently about, how long does it take to make a habit? It depends on the category. Exercise is not a 21-day habit. That is not. I think if you're like, I want to have sex every day or I want to eat chocolate every day, yeah, you can create that habit in 21 days because your body's like, ooh, this is great. Exercise doesn't tend to fit into that category. So we're actually talking about, I think the research showed it was somewhere between 56 and 62 days. So that is actually 3 times what you've been told. So I do want to mention that because so many people say that over and over again, like a mantra. And so if something isn't working within 21 days, they think, forget it, I'm out, I'm not doing this. Or conversely, they think if they do it for 21 days, that they're never going to have to work at it again. That's not the way it works. So habits tend to look like a rocky mountain. They go up, they go down. We have a little bit of success. That day was easy. Tomorrow really sucks. And so first, expecting that this actually could take 3 months to really kind of build it into our life in a way that we don't have to think about it. We don't need that alarm. We don't need the sign that says, get off your fucking ass in your house anymore.
It was going to be cute.
It's going to be cute. Everyone's will be cute. So that could take 3 months. So that's a lot longer than most of us been, that we think it should be. And then second of all, most of our daily activities, I think anybody who read James Clear's Atomic Habit, we know this, but a lot of what we're doing every day is just habit. We get up, we do our thing, we make our coffee, we do whatever. We do all these things because they're habits. So putting a new one in can feel super awkward. And that's why it needs to actually be small. So just kind of, there's tons of habit researchers out there. I'm not a habit researcher myself, but just kind of diving into some of those. If you're struggling, read James Clear's Atomic Habits. There are other books on habits. Charles Duhigg has a great one. I think it's actually called Habits. Oh yeah, there's your copy. And that stuff, I think it's good to just have some intellectual knowledge about, this stuff isn't easy for people. There are things that are easy, but where did I learn to drink coffee? I mean, I don't even remember. It's been so long. And so I just get up in the morning and I drink coffee and I think nothing of it. This isn't going to be that.
It's when you don't drink coffee that you realize you didn't drink coffee.
Totally. Yes.
What is wrong with me today? What's going on?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't caffeinate yet.
Totally. And so what we want to do is get movement into that same category of your life where you actually start to feel it if you did nothing. And again, I'm not necessarily talking about a quote unquote exercise where we're going to the gym, but just where you're like, yeah, I sat too much today. I don't feel good.
I got to learn more about this rolling around on the floor because it sounds kind of fun.
It's awesome. Yeah.
I wanted to take all my friends out to there's a hill in one of the parks and we wanted to go rolling down it. Here's all these 50+ year olds rolling down the hill like kids, but it just sounded fun. And we ended up not doing it because it rained that day. And I was, being dry was more important.
I'm with you.
But
yeah,
no,
I'm with you.
So for our friend that's with us,
yes,
what would you say would be your last points of wisdom for them?
I think that if we're living that type A lifestyle and thinking about achievement, the older we get, the more our body is actually part of that achievement because it will pop up and say, hi, we need attention. We need love. We need care. We need to be seen. We need to be looked after. We all know that intellectually because most of us, if we're 50, we remember being 20 and
yes.
how you could literally eat and drink and do anything. You could stay up all night and it was all good. And that isn't typically the case when we're 40. But the older we get, the more maintenance and the more attention we actually need to put into our body. And again, I know I'm not actually saying anything revolutionary because when we think about a 90-year-old, we're not like, oh, that person is spry. They're running marathons. Usually there's some health concerns. So if we start now, we can mitigate some of the things that are about to happen. We can be more aware there's research that shows that I love this one. I had a new client yesterday that said, I waited too long. He's mid-40s. And I said, actually, you didn't. So when we look at the body of somebody who exercised every day of their life from 20 to 60, it's virtually the same. So if you are under versus somebody who didn't, but started last year, it's virtually the same. So you look at the body of somebody who's exercised for 40 years versus somebody who just started. As long as you're under 60 years old, you are going to end up basically at the same place. So that's a huge win. It's a huge win.
So for us that are over 60, now what do we do? Because it's too late.
It's not too late though. So that's where everybody by age 60, 65, it is a bit of a spectrum. We're going to have to do some body sustainability. We're going to have to do some mitigation. We're just going to have to put some attention into that. I know it's cliche, but I always kind of reference like a classic car. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that if you have a 1955 Thunderbird, that owner puts time and attention into that car. You don't just like leave it in the garage for 40 years and then try to drive it and think it's going to be all good, because it's not. Those, the springs will have kind of given out. So that's where we really have to, and you can use a different metaphor if you want, but
the muscle car is perfect.
Amazing. So if you're over 65, you're a muscle car. You've got to get lovingly buffed. You've got to get those carpets cleaned. You've got to get that maintenance is going to have to be there. So whether you decide to listen to any of this advice or whether you can incorporate it or whether you can action it, we're all going to be 65 one day and we're all going to have to do it. So what you want to do is between 20 and 65, get started. Get started today. Get started today. And start small, because your results a year from now are going to look like you've always done it, which is, I think that's the best news ever. It's like, hey, we've got a system here where the human body is very forgiving to your past mistakes and errors and sins and things you did or didn't do. Great. So if you're kind of in that younger bucket, you're not probably going to have to do quite as much loving care, but you can really build those habits and you can really mitigate a lot of. It's always going to be easier to prevent something than to fix something. So ask anybody who was on the diabetes spectrum. It's easier to stop it when that doctor says, hey, we have some blood sugar markers here, than it is going to be to treat it once it's gone to the other side. Mm-hmm. So that's an example. We all know this, but it's easier to walk on a leg that's not broken. Once it breaks, then we have to do a bunch of rehab and physio and things like that. So the body is going to be the same. So once and it's not a line in the sand, but 60 to 65 is where the body aging tends to there are things that shift fundamentally. So anything that we can do before that to not only build habits, but to do preventative work, that's going to be your big win. Anything after that, we're all going to have to do it anyways. It's just what's the nature of what we're looking at, or do we have a broken leg? Is it sprained? Is it severe? Is it not severe?
And do what you can, even if it's just stand up.
Yeah.
But if I was to sit on the floor, I might not get back up. So
yes. I'm a movement specialist, and people are often really surprised at how honestly basic and simple my routines are. I sleep. I eat vegetables. I go for walks. I do some combination of laying on the floor, either with or without a ball. And then, that shocks people because it's just really like, that's just so, maybe not the ball part of it, but like, it's just so human what I'm doing. It's nothing magical or special. It's actually, in fact, really boring. But quite often we're looking at health practitioners of like, what's the big flashy thing that I can do? I mean, it's like sleep, eat healthy, reduce your stress. Move, get off your fucking ass.
It's a new one. We're gonna have to make a shirt and sell them. No, actually, we should put them on the butt of a sweatpants.
We really should. Yes, yes, with little buzzers.
It doesn't need to say pink. It needs to say "get off your," and that's it.
I love it. I think we're on to something here.
Oh, this has been so much fun, Janis. Thank you so much for joining me, having a great time. I love learning these simple things because life doesn't have to be as complicated as we make it. And these simple changes are so much easier to add. I mean, you can always add more later, but let's start small. Let's stand up once an hour. Let's make a commitment right now that I'm going to put on my watch. I'm going to stand up once an hour, and it's all I was going to say fault, but it's a good thing, right?
I'll happily take the blame for that one. Yes.
So, listener, thank you so much for joining us. I know this is going to benefit you. I am not a medical professional. I am not a mental professional. I'm here for entertainment purposes. I love it when I have smart people come on the show with me to share their knowledge and everything that they've learned. So stay tuned for the next episode.
Are you tired of waking up exhausted? You are not alone. If you're looking to take your life back, let's start with the simple step of adjusting your self-talk. Stay tuned for the next episode with your host, Lara Jane. Remember to follow the show so you don't miss a next simple step that you can use to feel more confident. And please leave an honest review.